And we're live. Welcome to the first edition of the podcast. I'm Andrew Ravens of Wrestling News Co. and eWrestlingNews.com. My co-host is John over at Wrestling Inc. and Low Kick MMA. Make sure to check out his MMA podcast at the Right Hook. Right Hook. That's correct, John, right?
Right Hook Radio. Yep.
There you go. And got to get those plugs out of the way. All that social bullshit will be in the description, so make sure you check that out so you know when the podcast is released. And as we record this is a couple days after WrestleMania. And man, WrestleMania week is always one of those weeks that I kind of dread, yet I'm excited for. It's a shit ton of work, but it's always a fun event. And I think we have to do justice by talking about a certain individual, a man who has brought so much to pro wrestling, and that's The Undertaker. He wrestled Roman Reigns in the main event of WrestleMania 33, and while he has said it in the past that he would retire, it's looking like the dead man is retired. So, John, with that being said, I know you're a big Taker fan. How heartbreaking was it to see your guy walk away?
You know what? Not as heartbreaking as you would think, because I myself am a Roman Reigns guy, and I actually, like Roman, and I'm kind of the old school mentality where if you're on your way out, you got to put the next guy over, and Taker is of the same mentality, so I don't think he had any problem whatsoever putting him over. I'm a little disappointed that the streak couldn't have gone, all the way through and never been, he could have never been undefeated at WrestleMania. But I understand why they're doing it now. They're just laying out the groundwork for the future. You have the two guys who beat the streak. Now, like Paul Heyman said, they have to meet up and see whose yard it really is. So, but yeah, like you said, Taker is arguably the greatest of all time and has the greatest gimmick of all time. And everything he's done for the company, man. I mean, people idolize him backstage. People really look up to him, and he's really like a god to many people backstage. He's just like the epitome of what a WWE superstar should be. He carries himself in a great way, and he's very passionate about the business. And I think he really showed that when he, did the job and put Roman over at Mania. So it was sad to see him go because, like many others, I grew up watching him, and he was my favorite superstar. I'm from Houston, Texas. He's from Houston, Texas. That was obviously a big factor, but his gimmick was just so captivating, and I always clung to it as a fan. And it's going to be sad to see that go, but there's a great crop of superstars coming in, ready for the next generation, and it's really the end of an era, man. But it was bittersweet. Roman goes over, but it's the dead man's last match. It was quite the WrestleMania, to be honest. It was I enjoyed it.
Well, I did too, and I thought the fact that they added JR, good old Jim Ross, back to the announce table, I just thought that they put that over so well. I thought JR did a very good job. And if you look at The Undertaker's career, he was never the man, but he was a top guy, right? He would carry the WWE
Yeah,
title or the world title a couple times, but he was never the guy. He didn't need
yeah,
to be champion because he was an attraction. He was something different. And when that happens, you stand alone. And what he has done in his career is tremendous. And he has definitely left an impact on the business. And I can say this, I really do believe this is his last go around. I think it should because he's looking rough. He needs hip surgery. But I will say it's going to be very, very odd to go into WrestleMania season next year and not know, that you're going to see the dead man walk out. You're just not going to see it anymore. And it'll be an adjustment period for everyone. But at the end of the day, we'll move on and we'll see if he gets inducted into the Hall of Fame next year. And this show had so much going on. It was really a marathon of a show. I believe it went 7 hours, if not nearly. It dragged at some points, and it almost seemed like it peaked after the Goldberg Brock Lesnar show. But I think one of the biggest highlights coming out of this show was the Hardys. They made their return. There was speculation and reports for months, it seemed like, that they were going to come back. But the biggest question was if they were going to keep their broken gimmick that they created in Impact Wrestling and then eventually transition to ROH with, if they were going to return with that. And the best way I can describe it is Jeff Hardy is the old Jeff Hardy, and Matt is a 50-50 looking broken Matt Hardy, right? He goes in and out of character, and it's very odd. I thought they would return on this show. I'm glad that they returned on this show, but I think the biggest question coming out of all of this is how will WWE handle the booking of this? Either they're going to go in the broken direction eventually, or they're going to go with the old school Hardy Boys. And I think while people are glad that they're back in the company, the biggest question is how long can they have that act? Because if you recall when the Dudley Boys returned, they were on fire for a good 6 months. And then booking got bad, it got lazy, and the fans did not care. Now, while they were veterans and they got put to guys over, it just kind of faded. And I'm a little bit of afraid of that for the Hardys.
Yeah, same here. Same here, man. After seeing what happened with the Dudleys, I'm really scared that they're going to mess this up. But I think they have a really big opportunity to do something really big with this broken gimmick. I mean, as soon as the Hardys came out at WrestleMania, which, by the way, I believe was the pop of the night, it was insane. The crowd went nuts. When that happened, everyone just started chanting, delete, delete, delete. I mean, this gimmick is super over with everyone in the wrestling world right now. I mean, there's a lot of people that are really behind this. And Matt, like you said, is a bit of a 50-50 of old Matt and broken Matt. Jeff is full-on Hardy Boy. You know, he doesn't care. And I'll admit, it's been a little weird seeing Matt break character after all this time, just by, seeing TMZ interviews of him still in character. So it's an adjustment period, I think, for me, because I was so used to him staying in character all the time. But I just really hope the WWE keeps them strong, because they really are a huge draw, and they are a big, they're so beloved in the wrestling community and the WWE universe. So I hope that the WWE keeps them booked strong and keeps them in the title hunt, and don't just write them off the way they did the Dudleys, because really, like you said, it got really stale after a couple of months, and you just didn't care. At one point, I was just like, man, when are their runs going to be over? Because this is pretty bad. So I really hope that doesn't happen with the Hardys. I love the Hardys. Me, my dad, and my brother freaked the hell out when we saw them come out, because I had hope that they were going to come out, but I didn't think so. The New Day swerve got me. I thought the New Day was going to go into the match. But and it all made sense, because the New Day were the hosts and they were in their gear and everything. And then that music hit, man. Everyone went nuts. So I really think if they scratch and claw to get this broken gimmick back under Matt's control, or the WWE's control, whoever, they have a chance to do something really special, and maybe even a singles run for Matt and Jeff. Who knows? But I'm really excited to see what they do going forward. I just really hope it doesn't end up like the Dudleys.
Yeah, I think everyone does. But I will say this. I'm very glad that they put them on Raw. Raw is god-awful to watch. 3 hours is enough. And while I think a lot of people would have liked to seen what they could have done on SmackDown, because if you look at it, yes, Vince McMahon still signs off on everything. And yes, it's still a WB product, but it just seems like SmackDown is a little bit looser of a show. And while I don't think that they could get away with their broken gimmick right away on SmackDown, I'm glad that they put them on Raw, because not only are they stars and they add star power, but also it gives the viewer something to look forward to in the show. If you look back at this past Monday, they were in the second segment. So you had your opening segment, and then boom, you had the Hardys, and it was a title match, and it was good, and it popped the crowd. And it was so well done in that sense. And then on Wednesday, just out of the blue, it actually surprised me when it popped up on Twitter. But Simon Gotch, he got his release from WB. Granted, it was a mutual release. He wanted out. They were all right with it. They weren't doing shit with him anyways. He worked Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royale on the pre-show of WrestleMania. The Vaudevillains wasn't doing anything. I thought he was talented, but I hated his gimmick. Is WB going to miss Simon Gotch? Because I know I won't.
I'm right there with you. I'm not the vaudevillain gimmick. It did absolutely nothing for me. I wasn't on board with it at all. I actually really disliked it. There was a point a few months back, I believe it was, where they were involved in the tag team title picture. It was them, Big Cass, and all those guys. And I was just like, man, I really hope these guys don't get put into the main title picture and win the belts, because I'm that gimmick really bored me. Everything about it really bored me. And like you talked about him getting released, everyone says that his personality kind of rubbed everyone wrong backstage, and he got mauled by Sin Cara in a backstage brawl, and everything just went downhill from there, and there was speculation about his release since then. Now he's finally getting released, and then there's talk of an Aiden English singles push, which I'm looking forward to. I hope it's not with the same gimmick. We'll see what they do with him, but no, I won't be missing Simon Gotch from the WWE just because of his gimmick, man. I wasn't on board with the whole vaudevillain gimmick. He probably could have done something, good, with either a different gimmick with Aiden English or on his own, but I just wasn't on board with the whole vaudevillain thing.
Yeah, with Aiden English, his previous gimmick where he was almost this Englishman who sang, that is the best way I can actually describe his character, and I would love to hear another description of it, because I don't know necessarily what it is. It's very, very similar to the vaudevillain gimmick, right? And I think he's very talented. He definitely has mic skills. He showed that when he was in NXT before he got into a tag team with the Gotch. And while I wasn't a huge fan of the gimmick, I at least didn't feel like, please, Lord, get this man off my television set. But I think they have to repackage him. I really don't. No one gave a shit about the Vaudevillains. They were over in NXT, but everyone is over in NXT. If you're not over in NXT, you're just not going to get over with whatever gimmick that you are portraying. And I think if they just keep him with that same gimmick, he's doomed. And they should, honest to God, release him if that's it. But it'll be very interesting to see what Gotch does. I assume he's talked about this on Twitter, actually. He's going to take bookings for wrestling events and appearances, and supposedly he's in negotiations with RF Video and Kayfabe Commentaries to do a shoot interview, and I think he'll sign with one of those, and it'll be very interesting to see the explanation behind his desire for his release. If I had to guess, I would assume it's just they weren't doing anything with him. He's on the road so much, and a lot of these guys in WB, they're looking at the indies. And if you don't mind going and working in a gym, making some killer cash, especially if you reinvent yourself, right? Then that, and you get to pick your own schedule, it's just so much better than doing nothing in WB, sometimes not even being used on shows. So what's the point of me driving to all these towns and flying if I'm just going to sit in the back and play on Twitter? There's no reasoning behind it. And it'll be very interesting to see what his reasoning behind it was. But I agree with you, man. I don't think anyone's going to miss him. And I think it's just going to be whatever. And kind of sticking with the NXT talk that I brought up, it happens, or it has happened the last couple of years, but there was NXT call-ups on this past Monday and Tuesday's episodes of SmackDown. We had the Revival, which is the former NXT Tag Team Champions. We had Ty Dillinger, who gets mega over with his 10 count, which I ultimately think will be his downfall. And then, of course, the big name on SmackDown, two-time NXT champion Shinsuke Nakamura. And everyone, including you, John, can give me shit about how I pronounce Nakamura's first name because I'm just a redneck who apparently cannot say Japanese very correctly. I digress. I think the Revival will do awesome on Raw if they are just kept away from the Hardys. If they go into a program with the Hardys in 2 months, they're doomed because they'll most likely lose. It's a shitty situation either way you look at it, right? If you have the Hardys put them over, then the Revival is dead. Boom. No one gives a shit about them because they have to eventually climb up the ladder and get the titles and then have a long run with them. And if they beat the Hardys, then you're devaluing one of your hottest acts on Raw. With Ty Dillinger, I love the fact that he's on SmackDown because I think he'll get pushed pretty well. I don't think he'll be anyone big, but I could definitely see him feud with like Corbin for the IC title, but I just don't see him as a main eventer. And before I get your thoughts, I need to address Nakamura. What do you do with that guy, right? Do you like keep having him come out there and just do his entrance for a little bit, and then it looks like he's going to do a feud with The Miz, but do you push him right away to the WWE title? Because if you looked at the NXT's booking, they did a tremendous job for the first 8 months, and then they just fucked it up. They fucked it up so bad. And the reasoning behind that is they had this slow build. He won the title. Awesome. He defended the title. Awesome. And then he lost it. And no one gave, I shouldn't say no one, but it hurt his value as a top main event player when he lost to Joe. And then he won it back, and then he lost it. And I think that hurt him in the end. He has a fresh start on the main roster, but I just think they need to tweak the booking just a tad bit. And honestly, I know this is outrageous to say in this day and age, but if he's going to get the WB title, he needs at least a year's run as champion. And that was my rant.
No, I agree with you on that. And I'll be honest up front, I don't watch NXT too much. The last one I watched was Shinsuke and Joe. So I only got to see that match with them, and I was a fan of his work inside the ring right after I saw that. It was a great match. But the Ty Dillinger thing, the first time I got to see him was at the Royal Rumble, and this whole 10 thing seems to be really over. So he came out on SmackDown, same thing. Everyone was going nuts for the 10 chant. So yeah, I think he'll probably, like you said, I can see him feuding for the Intercontinental belt. The Revival on Raw, I enjoyed that as well. I hadn't seen them before, but they put on a pretty fun match, and I enjoyed seeing that. I wouldn't put them into, with the Hardys, like you said, right away, because it will bury them. A slow, steady build up to the tag title picture, I think, is what's best for them. Nakamura, like you said, it looks like he's going to be feuding with The Miz, which I think is good. I would like to see him maybe a steady build up to the WWE title, because right now, you have Orton and Bray, and then we're going to have this superstar shakeup. Who knows who's going to come over into the title picture on that? But I do see him as a future world champ. Like you said, I do think he needs a long reign to kind of strengthen his character a bit more, because right now the only thing I'm really seeing for him as a casual fan who doesn't watch NXT is that he comes out and dances and his little entrance is really over. That's all I'm seeing from him right now. The people who don't watch NXT haven't seen what he can do in the ring yet. So I think a really strong showing for him as champ for a year is going to really strengthen his character and get a lot of people behind him. And he certainly has the ability to do that. He is a great worker in the ring, and he's really over with that entrance, man. That entrance and Bobby Roode's entrance music over in NXT is like the hot entrances right now. So, like you said, I'd really like to see him with a strong run as champ, maybe 1.5 years, just to see how he does with the title.
Don't even begin to get me started on Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt, their feud. Good God. what was it, maggots in the ring at Mania? Jesus. I didn't sign up to watch a sci-fi movie.
It would have worked a little better had Bray actually won and used that to win. It would have made a little more sense. But for them to do all that and it have virtually no effect on the match, yeah, it was a bit of a head scratcher.
Look, I know we're a little bit backtracking here, but I enjoyed the build. I thought it was weird, but it was intriguing and it was different. And anytime you get an alternative or something just so different and out there, it helps. But Randy Orton, I've never understood why people get behind this guy so much. The only matches that I've seen him have actual good matches was in, I believe it was 2012, 2013, something like that, with Christian when they were on SmackDown and feuding over the world title. And they had that summer program and they just killed it. And I really do think it was because of Christian. If you put him in the ring with Cena, good God, get the pillows out. It's a night. You're going to sleep. But it is what it is. And, you know, and I actually, and I'm going to brag about this because I saw it on Twitter and I was like, oh, it's just a troll. But then I started researching into it and sure enough, it was on there. And I broke the story. And then about an hour and a half later, Triple H tweeted out and confirmed it. And I updated the story. But NXT Chicago, a little bit over a month from NXT TakeOver Orlando. NXT is going to be running another TakeOver event. It's going to be in Chicago. It's going to be on May 20th. It'll be the night before the Backlash pay-per-view at the Allstate Arena. I don't like this at all. I am a huge fan. The way I break this down is, as someone who works in the business, as many pay-per-views as you can give me, I will take because it does good traffic. But on the other hand, if you're looking at it from a viewer and a fan standpoint, having these monthly and sometimes, and if you look at the 2017 pay-per-view schedule, WB is running a pay-per-view every 2 weeks. That is fucking overkill, all right? We have 5 fucking hours of programming throughout the week. It's too much, right? But we can't do anything about that. We can't do anything about the pay-per-view schedule. Now you're going to throw in NXT events every month. That's what it's looking like. Granted, they haven't announced anything for June yet, but I'm waiting on it. I'm looking for it. I'm expecting it. Too many takeover events. Am I wrong on here? Am I just outrageous?
No, I agree with you, man. I really liked how because they seemed to space it out pretty well earlier before, and now, like you said, they announced one right off the bat like that. I think Chicago's a great wrestling town, and they really should get an NXT takeover. But not this soon. I liked how they had it every couple of months. There was a nice break in between. It made the events feel a little more special. It's kind of like everyone's doing this right now in sports and entertainment. Like you have, and I know this isn't a UFC podcast, but you have like the UFC who has a pay-per-view almost every month, and it kind of takes the luster and the excitement away from it because you're putting on all these events. You're putting, like the WWE does it too. They have at least 1 or 2 pay-per-views each month, one for Raw, one for SmackDown, but they do this a lot. They just pop out these pay-per-views and it takes away from, making it feel a little more special. If they were to maybe have one every 3 or 2 months, something like that, it'd make it feel a little more special. But NXT TakeOver has done extremely well. It is like, I don't want to say it's the WrestleMania of NXT, but it kind of is. I just don't like saying that because WrestleMania happens once every year, but it's a pretty big deal for NXT. And for them to just maybe start dishing it out like it's nothing, that's going to really take away from the luster of it. These last few NXT takeovers have been very well received, and I think it's in large part due to that they didn't happen as often as they're probably starting to now. So if they do start dishing this out on a monthly basis, I think we're going to see this event die out really soon.
Yeah, the way that I look at it is I wouldn't necessarily, and I get where you're coming from, but I just want to just throw this out there. Takeover events are not necessarily WrestleManias. They're like the Big Four. Back in the 80s, before my time, obviously, but still, back in the 80s, you had the Big Four. And to this day, to a certain degree, you still have them, right? You have your WrestleMania, you have your SummerSlam, Survivor Series, Royal Rumble, your Big Four. And WWE modeled the takeover events off of the Big Four. Then they pushed it back up to 5, and then now they're slowly rolling these out. And I just think it's a mistake. I don't like it. It doesn't, and to add to your UFC point, because the UFC and the WWE's business model is so similar. Granted, it's different products, but in the grand scheme of things, it's the same. But they're just making a mistake by this. I hope that they just do this one and then they wait until August for SummerSlam weekend, because traditionally they do 5. So you have your Big Fours always the night before the Big Fours, right?
Yeah.
And then usually you have your 5th in either super late May or really early June. So you have usually about a month, 2 months to build things up. And with NXT, the way I will compare them, they're like an old farm truck when it comes to their programs. It's a very old school kind of feeling show. It takes a long time for stories to develop, and when they peak, it's at the end of the storyline and everyone wants to see it. They only have usually about 4 to 5 matches on these 2-hour broadcasts of takeover events, and other than the opening match, all of the rest of the matches, everyone is invested. They cannot wait to see those matches instead of just, they're there and I'm here for the main event. That's what is different about takeover events compared to the main roster events. And if you look at, going back to your UFC point, the UFC, yes, they hold monthly pay-per-view events, but they also hold these little fight night events, and those are damn near every week of the weekend or of the month. And you don't have time to build up to these fights. You literally get done with an event on Saturday night, you wake up on Monday, and you're like, oh, there's UFC event. Who's fighting? You don't have any anticipation for a long period of time. Rather, you have a couple days to get incited or be like, I don't want to watch this. And that is something that NXT has different from that and different from the main roster. It's unique. It's different. It's better, but it's old school. And I think that's the issue that WWE has with it, right? They don't want to be old school. For God's sakes, they don't list WrestleMania's numbers anymore. It's just WrestleMania or WrestleMania Orlando. They don't say WrestleMania 33 or 34 anymore. They have an age problem. Granted, their CEO is 71 years old, but I digress. Something that I thought was extremely weird, and I thought it was very out of the blue, and I think a lot of people would agree with this, since everyone thought that the draft would take place in July, just like last year, and everyone was cool with that. You get your WrestleMania buzz, then you have your hangover, and then you go a little bit, and then you start looking forward to the draft, change up the shows, start putting guys on different rosters and creating new storylines and different matches and excitement. And I think that's a good formula. But I think they're doing half-ass draft would be a correct term, in my opinion, of this, because it's the Superstar Shakeup, which is the lamest lingo for a name. We're going to shake things up around here. And when Vince cut the promo on Raw, I'm thinking, well, what is it, a draft? Is it what the hell is it? And then you had to go on WWE.com to get they sent out this long article. It probably had 4 or 5 paragraphs, and there was only about 2 lines worth of shit that would tell you what it meant. And basically it's, well, GMs can trade guys. So you're trading. Why do we have to do this on a certain Monday night? Why can't we do this throughout the year? It doesn't make any sense. And I get that they're trying to go with like a sports theme. Granted, they love to call themselves an entertainment company, but when they're talking to investors, they always call themselves sports entertainers. But if you look at sports, Name any of them, and I won't because I don't want to waste your time. But throughout the season, what do? Or the off season, they trade people. You don't wait for a exact day, right? You have a trade deadline, but you don't have an exact day where you have to do all your trades all at once, and after that you have to wait, right? It doesn't make any sense. And I don't really know what this is all about other than trades. How many trades? Who's getting traded? The only thing that we really know is that reportedly Dave Meltzer, I have to give credit to, the New Day is going to SmackDown and AJ is going to Raw. And originally they were going to do Roman Reigns go to SmackDown, Styles go to Raw, but for whatever reason Vince changed his mind and Reigns is not going to SmackDown anymore. I don't know why. And I kind of feel like Reigns should have went to SmackDown, and here's why. Just because there's so much loose with SmackDown, it would have been interesting to see, A, if he turned heel, even though Triple H says he is, and B, what he could do with that heel run. Because I just don't see them turning him heel because he's the top merchandise seller other than John Cena. Superstar Shakeup. What the fuck?
Yeah, like you said, this when he first said Superstar Shakeup, I was like, okay, well, maybe this is just their way of trying to cover up and say, oh, we're not copying the NFL, this is our own thing. I don't like it. I mean, you see the NBA, the NFL, MLB, they all call it a draft because that's what it is. It's a draft. So why not just call it a draft? I don't know how I feel about them actually calling it a draft when you're really just mixing up the players on both, or not players, but the superstars on both sides of the brands. So I would say draft. They should probably draft people from only NXT because you're really bringing them up from developmental, and that is what you do in sports. You're bringing them up from developmental, which is college sports, whatever, and you're bringing up to the big time. So I could understand if they want to do the day after WrestleMania a draft with NXT, and maybe just throughout the year, like you said, have a deadline. You can trade superstars. You can make big trades. You don't even have to do it on TV. You can announce the trade via social media, and that even builds up the anticipation for the episode to Raw to see why the hell they made this trade. So you could cut guys, and those guys that get cut go back to NXT. They could get signed. They could not get signed as free agents. I don't know. But they could handle this whole situation a lot better. As far as Roman getting over to SmackDown, I kind of understand why not. Why they're not doing this. I see them wanting to build up the feud between him and Brock to the next year's WrestleMania. Granted, that build up probably won't start for quite some time, but I don't see Brock ever going to SmackDown. I think they're going to keep him on Raw. Vince still sees Raw as the flagship show, but I'm right there with you. I like SmackDown. You know, I find it a lot more entertaining. I think that's why they're putting all their eggs into this basket with Raw and Roman and Brock. They're going to keep those guys right there. They're going to build up to their big match at WrestleMania. Bringing over AJ. I mean, there's a lot of things they can do, man. SmackDown does really good with what they have right now. I think Raw has a lot of the more bigger names, such as Kevin Owens, Seth Rollins, Samoa Joe. They need to split it evenly, and I think this could get a whole lot more interesting because then not only will you have great superstars on both shows, it's going to create competition because right now it's not really much. I don't see much competition going on. Me personally, and from everything I see on social media, I see a lot of people leaning towards SmackDown and really liking what SmackDown's doing right now. Raw, the 3-hour thing, them trying to just push this the cruiserweight stuff down our throats every week. I mean, I find myself wanting Raw to be over after an hour and a half. That's just me. Maybe I could be with it if Raw aired bi-weekly, but they're not going to do that. I think they need to cut back down to 2 hours. They need to figure out what they're doing with this whole draft situation because it's really just a mess right now. Like you said, that press release that they sent out on their website, they had like 5 paragraphs, and literally those 2 lines where they said GMs can trade and stuff like that, and that negotiations are ongoing between Daniel Bryan and Kurt Angle. That was the only worthy part of reading from that whole thing. So I'm interested to see what they're gonna do with this superstar shakeup, but I'm not really expecting a big, I'm not expecting it to be well received when it's all said and done. I think they're gonna probably drop the ball on this one.
They will. Raw is not going to get cut down as bad as I would love for it, as well as every single WWE fan out there. It's not going to happen. They're going to keep with 3 hours just as long as the USA Network is going to pay for it. And the only thing that I can say as encouragement to those who want 3 hours to go away and go back to 2 hours is WB's contract expires in 2019 with the USA Network, and then it's go time. And if I'm USA, the fact that wrestling doesn't get very high-priced ads and you're paying so much for failing ratings and the company coming out and saying, oh, well, our ratings for Raw and SmackDown, they don't mean anything because social media ratings are up, despite the fact that you draw nearly 3 million viewers on Raw as well as SmackDown compared to your 200,000 mentions on Facebook and less than 100 on Twitter. I think USA is going to at least think about dropping it down to 2 hours. That is our saving grace. And to end this fine podcast that I am proud to be a part of, I have a rant. Braun fucking Strowman, that big fucking bearded man, WB fucked up with his push. They built and built and built a very strong push for this man. He goes into WrestleMania, doesn't have a main match on the main card. He wrestles in the Andre the fucking Giant Battle Royale with all the jobbers. He gets thrown out with the Big Show. Then he comes out on Monday Night Raw and challenges Brock Lesnar. Lesnar, who is supposed to be a heel, turned babyface just for that moment. He was willing to fight Strowman, and Strowman backed down like a baby back bitch with barbecue sauce. They fucked it up. All right, y'all. That's the end of my rant. That's the end of this podcast. Make sure you hit all the social media links in the description, just so you know when the podcast gets released. And until next time, take care.
Peace.